Nobody could even comprehend this magnificent man who drafted the Declaration of Independence could father 6 children by his slave bride, Sally Hemings. But he did. That was Thomas Jefferson. And historians looked the other way. You know, we were not able to confirm that with DNA until 1998. You know, over 200 years after the fact. People are viewing our founding fathers like Jefferson and Franklin as these guys that are made out of marble and stone. Well, they're not. They're made out of flesh and blood, just like us. And they have the same frailties that we have as well. So we shouldn't hold history in such awe, you know, that we can't evaluate it. In the course of doing the research, I found another issue which we didn't get into in the book, but it was very fascinating. Our youngest first lady was only 19 years old. And what happened is when Grover Cleveland was campaigning for the White House, his wife died during the campaign. So he married the nanny, and she was the 19-year-old. Now, I say that for one reason, and that is today, we would never accept an 18 or 19-year-old girl as First Lady. It just wouldn't happen. I think another very interesting thing, which I did not know at the time I started the book, that we had a gay president, and that was James Buchanan in the 1850s. And you would think someone who's gay would have a great deal of empathy for other oppressed people. Now Buchanan, he was a staunch segregationist, pro-slavery all the way, and his lover and a man who occupied his life for 32 years, and the 4 years he was in the White House, Senator Rufus King from Alabama. It's amazing that relationship, you know, between two men, and by the way, he's the only sngle one, but he's not being accused of gay because he's being single. He was gay. And everybody had snide remarks that they would make in front of them, behind their back, and so on and so forth, you know. And
the Buchanan thing raises an interesting question that you and I were talking about before, and upstairs a little bit, what you were talking about is how the sex lives and the intimate lives of these people have had great impact on the nation as a whole and the things that we go through now. In that circumstance, wasn't there some great link between his relationship and moving towards the Civil War?
yeah, we think that King had a tremendous amount of influence on Buchanan. To sort of romanticize the slavery aspect. It was honorable to own slaves and to supposedly treat slaves well. You know, they were doing anything they could to justify slavery. But King definitely had a big effect on Buchanan, but I don't know if he'd have been any different if he'd have been on his own.
What about the thing that I actually knew nothing about, and I don't know, maybe I was the only person that didn't know this, but the question about whether there was any, whether or not, I guess, Lincoln was gay. And that's something that comes up in a great length in here, is about whether or not he might have been gay.
Well,
what do you say about that?
You have to take a long look at Lincoln's career. You know, everybody knows that he was a log splitter from Kentucky, and then he went to Illinois, became a lawyer, became a member of the state house in Illinois. But there was a man there by the name of Billy Green, who he roomed with. They shared a bed together. Now, we don't know what happened in that bed. That's why we're not saying that Lincoln is gay. I was talking to one of my historian friends who said, well, you got to understand that in Illinois in the early 18th century, you know, Illinois was like the western frontier. So there wasn't a lot of beds. So there was nothing uncommon about two men sharing a bed. I said, fine, I'll give him that one. But how about Joshua Speed, who was a wealthy slave owner and could easily afford beds, or the young Army captain in Washington, D.C., who always slept with Lincoln when Mary Todd Lincoln was out of town. Now, Doris Kearns Goodwin is a very well-known historian, written extensively about Lincoln. She wrote about his dark side, meaning that he was manic depressive or bipolar. Well, you know, in that period in our history, there was no treatment for people who were bipolar. But there was a sexual component to that, and she never really made that connection. And we were able to find some letters that were written between Speed and Lincoln that were very strange, to say the least. And
they're very intimate, and you insert some of them. They're very intimate conversations.
Yeah. And so we're not trying to tear Lincoln down. We're just saying, you know, these are the facts, and, you know, deal with them.
Well, and also I think one of the points that you make about that I thought was really compelling was talking about him and the Emancipation Proclamation, and how there perhaps you could view it in a different way, where maybe looking at it as having compassion for people who have been, and maybe in the way that Buchanan did it, maybe the opposite.
Well, I know when a little off subject, but this is important. When I was working on a chapter with Lincoln, I went back to read the Gettysburg Address. And the last time I read it, I was a kid, you know, I didn't even remember it. So in reading that, I realized what a perfect document that was, and it's probably the most important political document in the world today. And it was just a few minutes, a few hundred words. And it was like absolutely perfect. And I was having a talk with a friend of mine who knows a lot of creative people, writers, artists, directors, and people that are basically involved in the creative arts business. And they always say that they do their best work when they're in that zone. The zone means, you know, your manic depressive state takes over. You become extremely creative, you know, and then when you come out of it, it's often depression. But I think Lincoln vacillated back and forth between his phenomenal creativity and his sexuality.